Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one.
Chapter 1. The Introduction. Nestled between rolling hills and dense woods, the small town of Ashton had always felt untouched by time. Its cobbled streets were flanked by Victorian houses, their once vibrant colors now muted by years of harsh weather. Residents took pride in their close-knit community, where secrets were kept like treasured heirloom. It was a comforting rhythm of life, where everyone knew their neighbor's name, and the local diner served up coffee that could melt away any troubles. That is, until the summer of 2014. On a warm July evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows on the ground, the tranquility was shattered. It happened when Sarah Parker, the town's beloved librarian and mother of two, vanished without a trace. Her husband Tom had reported her disappearance to the police later that night, after she failed to return home from an evening stroll. Panic spread like wildfire. Scenes of warm family dinners turned to colder, darker whispers as the reality of Sarah's absence sunk in. Investigators quickly began piecing together Sarah's last known movements. Unbeknownst to the townsfolk, hidden beneath the surface of their idyllic lives lay complicated relationships and untold stories. As officers scoured the woods where she was last seen, they uncovered more than anyone bargained for. A web of secrets tangled tighter as they searched for the truth behind Sarah's disappearance. The air hung heavy with uncertainty, and in Ashton every resident felt the chill of fear settle in. The shadows that danced on the walls of their homes took on a new meaning, a reminder that sometimes the darkest secrets reside in the places people least expect. The search had only just begun, but in a town where everyone fought, they knew everyone. The line between friend and foe became dangerously blurred. Chapter 2. A Victim. Sarah Parker was the heart of Ashton. Her light caramel hair framed her face, framing bright blue eyes that sparkled with warmth and kindness. At 34, she was known not just as the town librarian, but also as an avid volunteer, always seeking ways to support local causes. Sarah had a unique ability to make anyone feel welcomed. The doors of the Ashton Library were not just portals to books, but inviting thresholds to community, connection, and comfort. Neighbors shared coffee and laughter within those hallowed walls, their conversations drifting between covers of classic literature and local gossip. Born and raised in Ashton, Sarah had deep roots in the town. Her parents had run the bakery on Main Street, and her mother had taught her the art of storytelling, often spinning tales late into the night. Those early memories built a foundation for her passion for books, turning a young girl into a community killer. Her two children, a son and daughter, adored her. Weekends were often spent exploring the hills or having picnic lunches on the bank of Lake Madison. But even the most vibrant lives can hide shadows. Underneath her bright smile lay challenges that many were unaware of. Tom, her devoted husband, had seen how Sarah struggled to balance work, motherhood, and her own aspirations. Lately, he picked up on her quiet moments of despair. There were days when she felt suffocated by expectations, both self-imposed and society. Sarah had confided in her closest friends about feelings of isolation, of being overwhelmed by her responsibilities. Yet, she never envisioned that those whispers of doubt could lead to something far more sinister. 4 days following her disappearance, Sarah's absence was becoming a haunting reality, transforming the essence of who she was, from vibrant and celebrated to a tragic mystery. The news spread, painting her as both a beloved victim and a searching enigma, leaving a community in turmoil and desperation. Each day that passed deepened the pall of despair over Ashton, amplifying the nagging question that plagued everyone. What had happened to Sarah Parker? Chapter 3. The crime scene. The air was thick with humidity as Detective Mark Henderson stepped into the dense woods bordering the edge of Ashton, the place where laughter once echoed on summer days, now cloaked in an unsettling silence. At the state park, lined with thick underbrush and towering pines, had become the focal point of the investigation into Sarah Parker's disappearance. As he navigated through the foliage, the crunch of twigs underfoot seemed amplified against the backdrop of anticipation that had gripped the town since her last sighting. Henderson was no stranger to investigation. He had served on the force for over a decade, yet there was something uniquely unnerving about this case. A gut instinct that told him it was more than a simple missing persons report. He knew the community felt it too, a familiar peace disrupted by a chilling unknown, transforming their cherished surroundings into a potential crime scene. His team had set up search grids, methodically combing the area for any sign of Sarah. As they spread out, air filled with murmurs and rustlings, Henderson's focus fell on a clearing not far from the last known site. The earth was unsettled, a stark contrast to the meticulously kept paths nearby. As the detective knelt to examine the area more closely, the weight of his flashlight illuminated a scrap of fabric snagged on a jagged rock. His heart sank. Was this piece of cloth from Sarah's clothes? Each moment spent searching was laced with dread. He motioned for his team to gather, commanding their attention to the find, the fragile thread that could lead them to answers. They soon recovered more. A discarded shoe, his laces frayed, and a small pendant that had once hung shyly from Sarah's neck. Each item added to the grim mosaic forming in Henderson's mind. What had begun as a routine investigation was unraveling into more complex threads of unease. With every discovery, hope dwindled, replaced by an unsettling realization that they were not merely looking for a missing person, they were grappling with the possibility of a crime buried within the shadows, a familiar terrain. As they organized a more concentrated search, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the forest. Each passing moment stoked the urgency. Time was slipping away, and the investigation loomed over the town like a dark cloud, casting Sarah's absence deeper into the conscience of a community that had felt they knew who they were. Chapter 4. The early investigation. The dim light of the police station buzzed with energy as Detective Henderson gathered his team in the interview room, a space filled with the faint scent of stale coffee and urgency. Thick files were sprawled across the table, each one detailing the lives intertwined with Sarah Parker and the potential threads leading to her disappearance. He noticed the determination etched on their faces, a drive to unearth the truth buried beneath layers of uncertainty. Initial interviews began with those closest to Sarah. Tom's face was a mask of worry, his hands trembling slightly as he spoke. "She was just so busy, you know." The kids, work. There was so much on her plate. I thought she just needed a break, he explained, his voice a mix of frustration and guilt. It seemed he was stuck in a loop of what if and if. Oh, meanwhile, friends recounted glimmers of Sarah's life and her quiet struggles, painting a picture of a woman continually striving for perfection. Questions about recent interaction led to whispers of a petty dispute with a local grouch, Mrs. Davidson. Several witnesses claimed Sarah had avoided her lately, a distancing that encapsulated the tensions bubbling beneath the surface of their small town. Several hours into the investigation, a neighbor's tip redirected them to a group of teenagers who frequented the pub. Sarah had been spotted speaking with two of them just hours before her disappearance. A seemingly innocuous encounter that left plenty of questions. Henderson and his team quickly tracked down the young witnesses, their laughter starkly contrasting the ominous atmosphere that filled the air. The teenagers were hesitant. Their nervous fidgets betrayed a mix of excitement and discomfort. "We didn't mean to be rude," one boy stammered. "But she asked us about the trails. We thought she was just looking for a quiet place." The comment was innocent on its face, but raised red flags for the adults in the room. As night descended, the mood grew grim. Each individual they spoke to added complexity to a case that was quickly spiraling into uncertainty, from whispers of jealousy among friends to the unease surrounding that last interaction with the children. It became painfully clear. The idyllic veneer of Ashton hid darker undercurrents. More and more, Henderson felt the weight of the case bear down, as he realized this wasn't just about finding a missing woman, it was about unearthing the hidden truths of the townsfolk and facing what lay within the hearts of those they thought knew best. The town was slowly transforming from a refuge into a turbulent sea of secrets. Trust was fraying, and every hour brought them closer to a precipice of revelation. Chapter 5. The Dead Ends. Days turned into weeks, and as the sun shone brightly over Ashton, the mood in the police station grew stifling. Detective Henderson found himself staring at the whiteboard plastered with notes, timelines, and pictures of Sarah Parker. There was a growing sense of frustration, and each errant pen mark felt like a silent indictment of their effort. With each day that passed, hope waned and desperation filled the void. Investigators pursued every lead. They interviewed Sarah's colleagues from the library, neighbors, even old high school friends who had long moved away. They followed each thread, running down tips that led to dead ends like a marathon runner hitting the wall. One witness after another spoke of unremarkable contact or recalled mundane encounters, but none could pinpoint a reason or source for Sarah's disappearance. A significant break emerged when they cross-referenced cell phone records and discovered Sarah's phone had pinged a tower just outside of town the night she vanished. A frantic search was conducted at the location, a secluded clearing that offered little more than overturned leaves and a sense of foreboding. As the officers sifted through the area, their hearts sank with the realization that their efforts yielded no more than traces of nature, devoid of human presence. The investigators' focus shifted back toward the two teenagers who had last interacted with Sarah. After days of probing, they managed to arrange a second interview with them. Sitting in the sterile room, Henderson noted a palpable tension. The boys fidgeted, speaking over each other in half-formed statements filled with hesitation. Answers that should have been straightforward became tangled in vagueness. The more questions they asked, the more elusive the truth felt, their once reliable recollections morphing into unhelpful riddles. Maybe she wanted to, I don't know, get away, one boy suggested, running a hand through his hair. Visibly anxious, this vague notion seemed to ignite a firestorm of suspicion. Was he deflecting or genuinely unaware? Just as Henderson's frustration peaked, a call came through, yanking him from his reverie. A missing persons report filed for another woman in a nearby county had surfaced, leading detectives to ponder the possibility of a broader, more sinister pattern of disappearances. The notion sent a ripple of energy through the team for a moment, but it quickly devolved into another dead end when that case too fell silent. The pattern was troubling. What began as a quest to find Sarah morphed into an exhaustive hunt for answers, where each step forward brought them 2 steps back. For Henderson and his team, shadows loomed larger. They had become entangled in a vortex of uncertainty, adrift in an ocean of frustrations and unanswered questions, with each passing moment interwoven with the realization that the closure they sought was still frustratingly out of reach. With every day, the dread settled deeper into the fabric of Ashton. And the question remained, where was Sarah Parker? Chapter 6. A break in the case. As the autumn leaves began to fall, the cool air held a sense of renewal that contrasted with the somber state of the investigation into Sarah Parker's disappearance. Just as hope began to fade into resignation, a breakthrough emerged, sparked by the kind of chance encounter that often seems scripted for detective drama. It was a crisp Friday morning when Officer Lisa Mullins, assigned to canvass nearby neighborhoods for any lingering tips, knocked on the door of a modest home nestled in a cul-de-sac. Mrs. Collins, a retired school teacher, greeted her with a warm smile, but the strain of uncertainty hung heavy in the air. After establishing the purpose of her visit, Mrs. Collins invited her in, offering a cup of tea as they settled into the living room, adorned with knickknacks and well-loved books. In passing conversation, Mrs. Collins recalled a peculiar incident from the night Sarah went missing. I was sitting on my porch when I saw a car parked unusually long near the edge of the woods. It didn't look familiar, more of a dark SUV than anything else, she said, a furrow forming between her brows. It was odd, almost as if someone was waiting for something or someone. Intrigued, Mullins listened intently. Did you see who was in it? She pressed gently. The elder woman hesitated, rifling through her memories. I didn't see faces, but the driver was fidgeting, moving about. After a while, the car just drove off into the night. The simple recollection provided a flicker of hope amidst a sea of unanswered questions. Mullins quickly relayed the information to Henderson, who wasted no time in rallying his team for a meet. They pooled resources, cross-referencing nearby surveillance footage and conducting checks on recent vehicle registrations in the area. As the hours whirled by, they resolved to focus on dark SUV registrations that fell outside typical owners. It wasn't long before they flagged a vehicle belonging to a man named Greg Holloway, a local shop owner with a murky history. Holloway had no known connections to Sarah, but his past marred with petty crimes and run-ins with the law suggested he was worth closer scrutiny. Early the next morning, a team of officers approached Holloway's store, a small hardware shop nestled at the far edge of town. The bell above the door jingled as they entered, a stark contrast to the gravity brought within by the detectives. Holloway looked up from behind the counter, a vague expression of surprise developing into something much darker as he met Henderson's gaze. With each question, a tension unfurled in the air, a palpable sense that they were inching closer to answers, yet held at arm's length by a wall of unyielding silence. Henderson could feel it. The fragile threads of fate had begun to weave tighter, a tantalizing glimpse of hope glimmering in the shadows of uncertainty. This could be the lead they had desperately sought, the spark that would either illuminate the truth behind Sarah's disappearance or plunge them back into the depths of ambiguity. Chapter 7. The Suspect. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the interrogation room as Henderson settled in across from Greg Holloway. The closeness of the room intensified the charged atmosphere, shadows shifting as the overhead lights flickered slightly, enhancing the tension hanging in the air. Holloway, an unkempt man in his late 40s, leaned back in his chair, his disheveled hair matted and eyes flitting around the room, as if searching for an escape. "We'd like to talk to you about Sarah Parker," Henderson began, his voice steady but firm. The mention of her name caused Holloway to flinch, an instinctive reaction that didn't go unnoticed. "I don't know anything about that woman," he replied quickly, a defensive edge creeping into his tone. The detective noted the shift. This was the reaction of a man pulled into the spotlight against his will, or potentially someone hiding something darker. Henderson pressed on, detailing the timeline of Holloway's night, the week of Sarah's disappearance, emphasizing the neighbor's sighting of the dark SUV. "People saw you parked near the woods, Brett. What were you doing there?" His voice held an undertone of certainty, coaxing Holloway to crack under pressure. The susurration of silence stretched painfully long before Holloway shifted in his chair, a bead of sweat trickling down his temple. "Look, I was just passing through. I swear, I go for drives sometimes when things get too much at the shop," he stammered, his eyes darting around as if the truth might materialize from the walls around him. With each denial, Henderson could feel the walls closing in on Holloway. "You can tell us anything, Greg. We're here to help. But hiding things is not going to make this any easier for you." This time, Henderson leaned forward, locking eyes with him, challenging his evasive demeanor. The tension was palpable. The detective could hear the gears turning in Holloway's mind. "It's true, I saw her," Holloway suddenly blurted, his voice rising defensively as if he were battling the accusation rather than the situation at hand. "I saw her that night. She was with some kids, but I didn't think anything of it. They were just hanging out, he swore." The frantic tone suggested his mind raced, concocting nonsensical justifications to prove his innocence. Henderson decided to capitalize on the outburst, adopting a more patient demeanor. "We just want to understand. Did you talk to her? Did something happen? You can tell us." He paused, allowing the silence to loom while studying the man before him, waiting for the answer that felt tantalizingly close, yet still elusively out of reach. For moments, Holloway's bravado slowly unraveled, leading to shaky admissions about being in the area, but never mentioning contact with Sarah. Each hesitance fueled Henderson's suspicion, igniting the knowledge that they may have unearthed a key character in a narrative still shrouded in darkness. As the questioning continued, it became clearer that while Holloway may not have provided a definitive answer to Sarah's fate, he had undeniably woven himself into her story. The investigation was beginning to sharpen, and Henderson couldn't shake the feeling that they had entered a critical chapter in the search for the truth. Chapter 8. The Trial. As winter descended upon Ashton, cloaking the town in a shroud of snow, the piercing cold was nothing compared to the chill that had taken hold of the community's heart. For months, the investigation into Sarah Parker's disappearance had consumed the town. But now, it had escalated into a public spectacle. The trial of Greg Holloway was set to begin. The courtroom buzzed with a mix of curiosity and dread as townspeople filled the wooden seats, an eclectic blend of neighbors and friends, all hoping to glean insights into what might have happened to Sarah. The air was thick with unspoken questions, and the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. The judge, stern but measured, banged the gavel, bringing order to the chaos as the proceedings commenced. Anderson sat quietly in the back, observing the unfolding drama. The prosecution presented a narrative woven from Holloway's own words and the circumstantial evidence collected during the investigation. The dark SUV was identified, placing him at the scene near the woods on the night Sarah went missing, and witnesses recounted the tension surrounding their interaction. With every detail, the prosecution painted a chilling portrait, reminding everyone of the vivid smiles of children now overshadowed by a mother's absence. But Holloway's defense was equally relentless. His attorney crafted a narrative of doubt, questioning the reliability of the witnesses and the connection to the evidence. Is there any concrete proof that Mr. Holloway laid hands on Sarah? The lawyer barked, sowing seeds of uncertainty in the minds of the jurors. The courtroom watched with rapt attention, oscillating between sorrow and skepticism. As the days passed, testimony bore witness to Holloway's peculiar behaviors, his anxiety morphing into fleeting glimpses of anger. Whenever the name of Sarah was mentioned, each revelation seemed to circle back to the same question: was he the monster they feared, or merely a scapegoat in a tragedy where no one could offer closure? Amidst the tapestry of emotion, Sarah's family sat steadfast in the front row, their sleek attire potato sack heavy with grief. Her husband, Tom, had aged overnight from the relentless toll of uncertainty, his eyes marked with a mixture of determination and haunting despair. He frequently gripped his fists, struggling to contain the whirlpool of emotions, while their children remained a silent reminder of Sarah's vibrant, loving spirit. As the closing arguments were made, whispers filled the room with a palpable tension. The jury would soon retreat to deliberate, and a verdict hung in the air like a guillotine, capable of slicing through the fabric of ash. Unanswered questions simmered once more, but this time they cloaked the town in uncertainty about its broken innocence. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. As the jury filed in, every eye in the room was glued to the foreboding figures climbing the steps. The court clerk read the verdict, each word hammering into the collective consciousness of those present. The weight of the decision would not only define a man's fate, but perhaps shape the community's ability to heal or harrow it forever. As the gavel struck again, echoing throughout the building, the future of Ashton balanced precariously on the edge of an emotional knife, with whispers of guilty and not guilty swirling through the air like autumn leaves caught in a gust. The search for Sarah Parker took a pivotal turn. Justice was lurking just beneath the surface, and whatever emerged in the end, the scars left by her absence would forever haunt the town. Chapter 9. The Aftermath. The aftermath, the courtroom chaos melted into a heavy silence once the verdict was announced. As the words "not guilty" reverberated through the chamber, disbelief cascaded over the crowd like an avalanche. Gasps filled the air, muffled cries of anguish barely rising above the steady rhythm of hollow footsteps. As the jurors exited the room, Henderson watched as shock morphed into fury, on the faces of Sarah's family and friends, their faces pale as ghosts, grappling with the weight of their collective grief, now augmented by questions left unresolved. Holloway was free to walk out of the courthouse, his lethargic grin betraying none of the tumult that had defined his trial. As he left the building, reporters clamored around him, cameras flashing like wild fireflies in the dark. No comment, he repeated, a smug resolve in his voice, as if he had tricked the entire system and won a twisted sort of game. But for every celebratory flicker of a camera, there were dozens of individuals left to wrestle with their own sense of outrage and fear. The ramifications of the trial echoed throughout Ashton. The tangible rift spread through the community, relationships strained under the weight of suspicion. Some rallied to support Holloway, pointing fingers at the inadequacies of the investigations, while others felt betrayed by a system they believed had failed them. Former friends turned into foes, conversations stilted, and the town that once thrived on camaraderie was now painted in hues of distrust and division. Tom Parker, overwhelmed by the fallout, became a figure of quiet resilience. He often walked the paths where he had once strolled with Sarah, their children beside them, his heart a battleground of loss and anger. He found solace in their memories, clinging to the laughter recorded in picture frames that now lay untouched for fear of reopening wounds. You could see him, day after day, kneeling by the edge of Lake Madison, tossing stones into the water, each ripple a desperate plea for answers never provided by the trial's outcome. The community began to hold vigils in memory of Sarah, gathering near the library she had loved so dearly, each flickering candle a symbol of hope and mourning, held in unison. The gathering became both a moment of remembrance and a protest of visceral demand for closure and accountability, a stark reminder that a beloved mother was missing, and with her, a part of the town itself. As time moved on, Henderson found himself wrestling with his own emotions. The case haunted him, pervading his thoughts like a lingering specter. In quiet moments, he recalled Mrs. Collins's words, reflected on the fragmented clues, the paths taken and not taken, and wrestled with a gnawing sense of responsibility for finding Sarah. Months passed without further leads, and the case began to grow cold. Yet as the seasons changed, so too did the conversations surrounding Sarah. The lingering silence around her name transformed into whispered hopes for resolution, prompting growing movements advocating for the expansion of resources devoted to missing persons in the community. The painful narrative of loss sparked a unified desire for change, a chance to prevent future tragedies and ensure no one else would face the agonizing uncertainty that had gripped Ashton. In the end, Sarah Parker's story had become something greater than a personal tragedy. It ignited a collective reminder that amidst the tumult of their lives, the search for truth remained vital. As remnants of pain lingered, determination rose from the ashes, reaching into the future where perhaps one day the town could find peace in memory, while committing itself to the promise of never forgetting. Chapter 10. Reflection. As dawn broke over Ashton, the golden rays of light filtered through the trees, illuminating the town with a warmth that seemed to have been absent for far too long. It was a new beginning. Yet, the remnants of the past clung like shadows. Tom Parker stood by the lake, staring at the glassy surface, lost. Would she have wanted this? He pondered, grappling with questions that haunted him like echoes in the woods. The community had come together in the wake of Sarah's disappearance. Yet, The ties that once bound them were frayed under the strain of doubt and sorrow. Vigil gatherings shifted in purpose, transforming from moments of remembrance to calls for change. Each flickering candle served as a constant reminder of not just Sarah, but the fragility of trust and the importance of protecting one another. Anderson often found himself amidst those gatherings, enveloped in a shared determination that transcended their individual grief. It was in those moments, surrounded by the townspeople, that he realized the true weight of their journey. Sarah's absence had galvanized a movement, awakening a dormant sense of community that the town had long overlooked.